Hey, what's up guys? Before we get to today's video, I wanted to take a minute to tell you about a development with Martin Dodge in Bowling Green, Kentucky. If you've been coming to Challenger Fest for a while, you've known them to be a sponsor of that event. They do a pretty good sized display at the track. They have a cruise in over to the dealership there leading up to Challenger Fest there in Bowling Green. Well, they've reached out and said this year they wanted to get even more involved. So if you purchase a vehicle from them and you mention the Speedy's Garage YouTube channel, you're going to get true dealer pricing. True dealer pricing on the vehicle, and that is any in-stock vehicle as well as a factory order. So either one. I think TRX is the only vehicle that's excluded from that, but everything else is included. They're going to go a step further and they're going to cover your Challenger Fest entry. So you purchase the vehicle from them, you register for Challenger Fest, let me know, I forward you their information, they reimburse you for your entry for Challenger Fest to come and race and have a good time. I really enjoy seeing a dealership get involved in the community and in our hobby. Give back a little bit. They've been great to work with. They've taken care of a bunch of people up in Bowling Green during our racing events that needed some maintenance or other things done, tire rotations or tire swaps and things like that. They've done those over at the dealership for them, taking care of a random axle that happened to break or something along those lines. They keep those parts in stock. They've been really, really good to us over the years. If you're in town and buy the vehicle, you're going to get the first 10,000 miles or 1 year of oil changes and tire rotations included as part of that purchase. If you're not in town, they can handle working out the shipping and delivery logistics. They can handle that absolutely no problem. Again, that's Martin Dodge in Bowling Green, Kentucky. I'll leave a link to their website in the description. Now let's get to today's video. Hey, what's up Speedy's Garage gang? Welcome back to Speedy's Garage. We're going to continue our fuel topic this week, and I'm going to go out and do a little bit of recon. I've been talking about doing some flex fuel in the car, and I've started working on that with Mike from OST Dyno. Today, I'm lucky around here we've got 3 or 4 gas stations real close by that all carry E85. I'm going to go grab some samples and some old empty water bottles and bring them back to the shop. I'm actually going to test them and see what the actual ethanol content is from these 3 different or 4 different fuel stations. And I've got some testers, looks like that. I'll show you how to use those when we get back. And we're gonna see in the wintertime, I've heard the ethanol content can be lower. So it's March, we're gonna test it now, and we'll test it again this summer and see how much it changes. So let's get to it. So for racing, I'm still going to use the Renegade RM109 race fuel. I really like that race fuel. I know I'm getting consistent fuel, and it's purpose built or purpose mixed, I guess I should say, for the track. When I'm at the track, I want to know I've got good fuel in the tank and not have to worry about it. With E85 from the gas pump particularly, it can vary, and the pumps around here actually say legally it can go all the way down to E56. I'm gonna have to do a little bit more research, and I'll try to talk about this more later and figure out what the octane rating is when it's actually E85, and then how it diminishes as that ethanol content is lowered. If it gets down to E50, what's the octane rating? What's E60? What's E70? And that way I kind of have some break points to know if it gets to a point where, let's say, E70 is 98 octane and E80 is 102 octane, you're picking up 4 octane points from a 10-point jump in the ethanol content. And so I can kind of start to map that out. As part of the flex fuel tuning, HP tuners will actually data log alcohol content and also by percentage. And so I want to be able to also compare what the data log is showing to what the fuel is testing at, so that I know how close the data log is and I can trust it. And I'll do this in the fall, or in the spring, like now when it's cool out, and then I'll do it again in the summer when the fuel's better. I've tested some of it around here before just to see how good it was, and in the summertime it was E80, almost E85. It was like right around E82, E83 in my little beaker, and so it was very, very close, and I know I was getting pretty good fuel. I'm really curious to see what it's going to be today since it's been colder. And the reason they have to sometimes lower the ethanol content in colder weather is it's harder on a cold start to have smooth ignition with E85 or a higher alcohol content fuel. You'll see a lot of E85 tuned cars when they're cold. They start them up, they'll sputter and kind of have to warm up a little bit before they run smoothly. And that's a result of that cold alcohol being a little bit harder to ignite, and it just causes it to be a little uneasy on the idle at first until it warms up. In the summertime, you don't have that problem, because when it's warm out, it'll fire up no problem, because the alcohol will ignite no problem. So they do lower that alcohol content sometimes in the wintertime to avoid that problem for flex fuel vehicles. Now, the nice thing about the more modern cars is they can actually use the wide bands to infer alcohol content. This car, this Hellcat, doesn't actually have a sensor in it that is reading alcohol content. It's going to use the wide bands in the exhaust, and from there it can tell. I used to think that you had to have a sensor, but I got educated that GM is actually the only manufacturer, at least the only one that I know of, that actually puts a sensor at the fuel rail to read alcohol content. All the other manufacturers actually do it with a sensor in the exhaust system. So I'm hoping we have some pretty good luck. Working out with the pump E85, and it looks like it's going to benefit the car, I may start using Renegade's race E85, or maybe even E98, and see how it does at the track. For now, we're just going to be doing some street testing. I've got a pretty conservative 93 octane tune-up in the car. As you guys know, if you've been following along, it makes about 17 and a half pounds of boost in cool air. That's probably getting close to the limits of 93 octane. And so I wanted to see if I could run flex fuel and have a little bit of overhead, so I could start running. I run about 10, maybe 11 degrees of timing on my 93 octane tune. If with some flex fuel in the car, let's say it gets up to E70 or E80, and I'm able to run 14 or 15 degrees of timing, the car is just going to be that much more happy. But I can't do that on 93. For racing, we're going to see. I don't know what we're going to do long term. I'll do some testing, and if I like it and think it's working, I'll definitely be going with the Renegade brand E85 or E98 products. And as another reminder for those that haven't been following along, the reason I'm able to do this, or I think I'm going to be able to do this in this car, is I just put in a dual pump drop-in fuel system. And so that gave us some overhead on the fuel system. I'm running ID 1000 injectors, so they have some overhead too. The data logs are currently showing about a 50% duty cycle on the injector, but that's probably going to be the first thing I actually run out of when we start getting into E85. And I'm hoping with E85, you usually need about a 30% more fuel flow calculation to use for your numbers for duty cycle. I'm at 50% now. 30% more would put me at 80%, and I'm hoping I'm still good to go there. But again, ID 1000 injectors, Hellraiser 272 pulley, and a TI 285 dual pump fuel system is in the car. So I'm hoping that'll all kind of work together to give me enough to run this. Got a bogey. Ask, well, why don't you just run full E85? Well, it's because sometimes the gas pumps around here that are flex fuel or E85 gas pumps, they're out. I've seen it happen more than once, and I don't want to be always worried about if I'm going to be able to find E85 or not. So with the flex fuel setup, you kind of get the best of both worlds. You have to be a little bit more conservative on your tune than if you know you have E85 in the tank. So that's one thing that you have to be aware of, but it means I can just put 93 in there. If there's 5 gallons of 93 and I put 10 gallons of E85, it will just mix, and the car will sense how much ethanol content is in the fuel, and it will just gradually adjust the tune automatically. At least that's the idea anyway. I haven't ever done it personally. That's why we're doing this testing. All right, we got our first sample. Now I did go ahead and write the location and the address so I knew which one was which. Now on to number 2. Like I showed you, one of the other big benefits, that's $1.77 a gallon right now. So if you're able to get, my stuff I've read says that full E85 is about 105 octane. If you're able to get 105, even if it's 100 octane, if you're able to get 100, 105 octane for $1.77 a gallon, that's a win. Now, the only other thing you need to be aware of is it takes 30% more, like I mentioned. So that means your gas mileage is going to suffer about 30% if you're running full E85. But in a car like this that's supercharged, I'm really more worried about the power than I am the gas mileage, and $1.77 for 105 octane is amazing. Okay, there's number 2. It's actually the same brand. It does kind of smell like moonshine a little bit. You can smell the fuel in it, but definitely smells like moonshine. It's the same brand as the other place we stopped. Wanted to get 2 different locations to see if they vary. I expect they won't. Now I'm going to go to a third station that's a different brand from these 2, just so I kind of cover my bases. Okay, got our third sample, and prices range from $1.74, which is what it costs at this place per gallon, to $1.79 per gallon. So 3 different locations. One was $1.75, I think. One was $1.74. One was $1.79. So pretty cheap. Back at the shop, and I actually have 2 E85 test kits. I got this one, it's a little bit bigger, and then I got the quick fuel one. It's a glass tube. To make it easier for you guys to see, and since I have plenty of E85 to test with, I'm going to use the bigger one. But just so you know, there's 2. There's actually a bunch of these on the internet that you can get, but I like these 2. All you have to do, there's a line that says water. And so we're going to fill this up to that line. I'm going to use distilled water. And if you weren't aware, ethanol or alcohol and water actually bond chemically. So that's why these tests work, is because it mixes. It doesn't really mix, it bonds. I shouldn't say mix, because it actually bonds. Okay, you see you got our water right to the line. And I'm going to start with our first place that we went to, and it says to fill the rest of this up to this line. Hopefully you can see that with our E whatever it is. Hopefully it's E85, but we'll see. Still can't get over how much that smells like moonshine. So all I'm going to do is pour this in here. And then I'm just going to shake it up a little bit so that it mixes thoroughly. And then all we have to do is sit and wait for a separation line to form, and it's already forming actually pretty quickly. You should be able to see that line. It's right there. And that says that this is E80, which is actually pretty good. But you can kind of see where the cloudy liquid is, and then where it has a line and then it gets clear at the top. Well, that's that separation line that you're looking for on the test, and that's how you know what your E content actually is. And E80 for the cool weather that we're having right now is actually pretty good. That means they're switching over to the summer blend, or maybe they never went below E80 this winter, but that's a pretty good mixture right there. So that was our first sample we drew, and I went ahead and marked it as E80 so that I'll know. Now we're going to go ahead and test the second one. Here's our second sample, same process. Hopefully you can see that. The line is about right there. And again, we get E80. And this is from a different gas station, but the same brand. So that's about what I expected. I was curious if there would be any difference, and there's not. So these were likely filled with the same truck. So we got E80 again. Now we're going to test our third sample. And before I test this third sample, I wanted to point something out. And I haven't tested it yet, but we know this one's E80, and you can see how clear it is. I've got a piece of white paper behind it to try to highlight a little bit better. We know this one's E80. It's also very clear. This one, which I haven't tested yet, is more yellow. So my gut says that one's probably going to be less ethanol content. I bet that one's E70, but let's test it and find out. Okay, here is our third sample. I think you can obviously see the line right there. E75. So just like I suspected, it was definitely less ethanol content than the other 2. But the other thing is, look how cloudy it is. The other 2 weren't near as cloudy. And I wouldn't expect a 5% difference in ethanol content to make that much of a difference in the cloudiness of the liquid, but maybe it does. I'm not an ethanol E85 expert by any means, but it's way more cloudy. I don't know, maybe they use a cheaper base fuel or something with it. I'm not sure, but it looks quite a bit different. The other thing besides the color, it smells way more like gasoline than the E80 sample. The E80 actually smelled like moonshine. You could really detect the ethanol in it. This you really can't smell any moonshine or alcohol smell at all. So that's kind of giving me some clues, and also why, if you're going to run a full E85 setup, why you want to test your fuel if you don't have some kind of sensor in the car that's telling you what the ethanol content is, because it can vary so much. 5% may not sound like a lot, but smelling the fuel, looking at it, measuring it, it is 5% difference, and that could mean the difference in your engine being happy and it not being so happy. If your tuner has expected you to put real E85 in the tank and you end up with E70 or E75, that may not be such a good thing. That's another reason why I'm going to run the flex fuel setup, or hopefully I can, is because when that happens, the tune will just adjust automatically to the ethanol content that it has sensed. Our recon was a success. Now I know where I want to go buy my E85 when it's time for me to start using it in the car. I'm going to use the brand, obviously, that tested higher. I'm going to use that specific gas station, or the two that I tested. I know I've got a couple of options, and if I come across more and I see that they have ethanol, I'll run this same test on them. Now I know when I go pick this fuel up, I'll probably test the first initial couple of cans that I pick up. I'm probably going to put it in 5-gallon cans and bring it back to the shop so that I can mix known quantity as I'm testing, and that way I can determine if the log value for alcohol percent matches what I measure, and depending on how much 93 octane I might still have in the tank. I'm gonna try to get a full tank of E85, or in this case E80, and then see if the HP tuners actually logs an 80% alcohol content, and I'll know for sure. Super easy, takes about 30 seconds to test the fuel, so not a huge deal. Hopefully that showed you a little something on how all this works. Be sure to give the video a thumbs up if you liked it, and I hope you did. Check us out on Instagram. It's @Speedys_garage, as well as our website, www.speedysgarage.net, and hopefully I will see you out there.